The day the system found me. My CEO husband made me participate in a survival reality show. While the show was underway, his mistress said she wanted to see my reaction to being thrown into the remote wilderness. So he ordered the director to put me in a burlap sack and drop me off in an isolated mountain community, making sure the camera was recording at all times. That night, several elderly villagers broke into my dwelling with ill intentions. Everyone urged Julian to quickly send someone to stop them. But he just smiled indifferently. Chloe said this is how we get good show ratings/good TV. She won't die. Even if Alara knows I did it on purpose, she'll still come crawling back to me. But what he didn't know was that I had already agreed to leave the system. All I had to do was die in this world. Just as the elderly villagers tore my clothes, I felt the hilt of a knife nearby and, without hesitation, cut my wrists. Julian, who had been watching, completely panicked. Just when I thought I had returned to my original world, I opened my eyes to see a sleeping Julian. Beside him stood a tearful Chloe. Seeing me awake, Chloe immediately stood before me and said pitifully, "Alara, I know I went too far this time, but it was for good show ratings/good TV. You can't threaten people by cutting your wrists, can you? Julian was afraid something would happen to you. He sped dozens of miles in his car to save you and stayed by your side day and night without sleep." Her voice was full of reproach, and she deliberately dug her nails into my wounds. I gasped in pain, unable to bear it anymore, and violently pushed her away. The next second, a loud slap echoed in my ear. Julian's eyes were bloodshot, and his voice was furious. "Alara, I thought you were actually dying, that's why I risked everything to save you. Look at you now, you still have the strength to push people. Chloe was right, cutting your wrists was just a trick." Slapped to the ground, I scoffed, having expected as much. Between Chloe and me, he would always choose Chloe. The next second, Julian's cold voice rang out again. "Apologize to Chloe." "Why should I?" I blurted out almost instantly. For a moment, Julian looked incredulous. Before I would agree to any of his demands. When Chloe was sick, I made her nourishing soup/broth, and because it wasn't the perfect temperature after I blew on it, I had to apologize by kneeling on broken glass. When rumors spread about Chloe and him, I failed to clarify them in time, causing Chloe to suffer cyberbullying/online harassment, and I had to apologize by kneeling in the snow in the dead of winter. Because of the system, I had to endure, but now I won't. He raised his hand, and bodyguards immediately approached. I was forcibly pressed down to kneel before Chloe. Seeing my continued resistance, Julian's disgust intensified. He ordered the bodyguards to force me to repeatedly bow my head until I apologized. After completing 100 bows, my forehead was bruised and purple. Only then did a flicker of reluctance cross his face. He then picked up Chloe and, with a parting remark, "Don't ever think of using feigned death as a trick to threaten me again. It will only make me detest you more." He then left. As he left, I saw Chloe's smug smile in his arms. I struggled to prop up my weak body, swallowing the bitterness in my heart. I whispered softly, "This time, I'm not faking it." Unfortunately, Julian, who had already walked away, couldn't hear me. For several days in a row, Julian didn't appear at the hospital. Almost every day, I thought about how to die. Opening my phone, I saw that Julian had used my social media account to issue a clarification for Chloe. It claimed that the elderly villagers in the show were there because I had specifically requested them to gain attention and views. The comments were uniformly filled with hateful insults directed at me. "Alara, just die already." Using something like this to grab attention. I indifferently turned off my phone, not bothering to care. In my heart, I thought, soon, I'll be dead." The system's urging voice rang out again. "Host, you can return to your original world simply by dying in this one. 3 years ago, my parents were involved in a car accident and were sent to the intensive care unit, ICU. That's when the system first appeared. The system told me to help the depressed young man, Julian, recover, and if I succeeded, I would receive $5 million in medical expenses. At that time, his mother had passed away and his father had cheated, and in despair, he was about to jump into a river. It was my appearance that saved him from the water. After that, I spent my days by his side, accompanying him from having nothing to becoming a multi-millionaire. The year he loved me most, he held me tightly and told me I was his savior, saying he never wanted to be apart from me for the rest of his life. Just when I thought I had succeeded in the mission, while getting in 4 drip alone at the hospital, I unexpectedly ran into Julian accompanying Chloe, whose hand was only slightly scratched. Julian saw me, briefly panicked for a few seconds, then said dismissively, "It's just a fling. The position of Mrs. Julian will always be yours." I was helpless, and despite my heartache, I had to endure. Until he repeatedly gave away my important belongings to Chloe, I knew he wasn't just playing around at all. The system's voice rang out again. "Host, your parents in your original world passed away due to the prolonged delay, so the mission is over. However, as compensation, 5 million will still be transferred to you. You can return to your original world simply by dying in this one." At that moment, tears streamed down my face, and I knew I was finally saying goodbye to Julian. As I was about to jump from the hospital rooftop, Julian suddenly appeared. He yanked me back, his expression cold. "Alara, aren't you done with your dramatics? This is only the 4th floor, you won't die from jumping here. If you're going to put on a show, at least use your brain and pick a 6th floor or higher to actually kill yourself." Julian, utterly disgusted, led me down from the rooftop. When he brought me back to the ward, he was uncharacteristically gentle, even personally spoon-feeding a bowl of nourishing soup/broth to my lips. The last time such a scene occurred was 2 years ago, before Chloe. My body stiffened, a little taken aback. The next second, Julian spoke blandly, "Chloe is anemic. Drink more of this soup. You won't faint when you donate blood later." Sure enough, he was only this tender towards me when Chloe needed my help. Okay. I readily agreed. Anyway, the system said that as long as I died in this world, I could return to my original one. An excessive blood transfusion could certainly lead to death. Perhaps my agreement was too quick, completely different from my previous attitude towards Chloe. This time, a look of surprise appeared on Julian's face. After a few seconds, his expression returned to normal. "That diamond ring you wanted last time, I'll have someone send it to the family estate. Consider it a thank you for saving Chloe." The diamond ring Julian mentioned was a promise he made to me when we first started dating. At that time, Harry Winston matching rings were popular. Julian, his eyes bright, stood at the counter and told me that within 3 years, he would definitely buy this diamond ring for me and place it on my hand himself. Later, he paid an exorbitant sum at auction for a pair of diamond rings, but he personally placed them on Chloe's hand instead. I scoffed aloud and said nothing more. A needle as thick as her arm pierced my arm, but I remained expressionless. "Julian, how?" Couldn't help but frown. The next second, the doctor rushed in, looking somewhat flustered. "Ms. Chloe's anemia is quite severe, she needs at least 800 milliliters of blood. Ms. Alara has a heart condition, and after the transfusion, her life might be at risk. But her rare blood type is uncommon, and the hospital currently doesn't have this blood type in stock." "What?" Julian's face was alarmed. He thought for a few seconds. The next second, 2 voices spoke simultaneously. "Transfuse it. As long as it saves Chloe, I'll take responsibility if anything happens." "It's okay, I'll donate blood to her willingly." Fearing it wouldn't be enough for Chloe, I added, "If 800 milliliters isn't enough, then make it 1,500 milliliters. As long as it saves Chloe, I can give as much as needed." A blood draw of 1,500 milliliters could easily be fatal for me, given my heart condition. In contrast to my indifferent expression, as if I weren't the one receiving the transfusion, Julian, on the other hand, changed from alarm to surprise. After a few seconds of stunned silence, he spoke to me as if enlightened, "Seeing that cutting her wrists and jumping off a building didn't work, you want to use blood donation to make me care about you. I told you, my thing with Chloe is just a fling. You don't have to do this, it will only make me detest you even more." When he uttered the last few words, he deliberately emphasized them, speaking through gritted teeth, and his gaze was like venom. The old me would have felt heartbroken facing such treatment from Julian. But the current me just smiled indifferently. "All right, in that case, why don't we get a divorce? How about I make room for Chloe? Divorce? Julian's expression changed instantly, and he immediately grabbed my neck. I told you, stop using these tricks to compete with Chloe for my affection. The position of Mrs. Julian will always be yours, you should be content with that. It wasn't until my face was red with pain that he slowly loosened his grip. As he left, he said fiercely, make sure you protect your life. Chloe still needs your blood for transfusions. For 2 days, I served as Chloe's blood bank, from the initial 800 milliliters to eventually 1,200 milliliters. Chloe quickly recovered. She looked radiant, while my face was deathly pale. Julian, feeling a pang of sympathy, spoon-fed her the nourishing soup/broth, blowing on each spoonful to cool it down so she wouldn't get burned. Chloe glanced at me triumphantly, but her voice feigned remorse. Oh, Julian, Alara did donate a lot of blood for me. You should at least take care of her too. Julian paused, and a flicker of sympathy crossed his eyes as he looked at me, but it vanished as he turned to Chloe. Chloe took the nourishing soup/broth from Julian and walked towards me. If Julian won't feed you, then I will, Alara. My weak, chapped lips were cut by the metal spoon under her forceful feeding, bleeding immediately. My face contorted in pain, but my gaze fell on the necklace around her neck and the ambiguous marks on her throat. I remembered that necklace. Back then, Julian had fallen gravely ill and wasn't getting better. I prostrated myself, step by step, at the monastery for 2 full days. I bowed until my forehead bled, moving the abbot to give me these prayer beads. And after I brought the prayer beads to Julian, he miraculously recovered. Julian was incredibly touched then. He said he would wear these prayer beads forever and always remember my love for him. Yet now, something I obtained with such effort, he had carelessly given to Chloe. Chloe noticed the change in my expression, and her feigned innocent face turned smug. She deliberately showed me the broken part of the prayer beads. Leaning close, she whispered in my ear, you know, some beads are actually missing from these prayer beads. Julian and I were a bit too wild a few days ago, a few of them are still down there. My breath hitched, but I managed a faint smile. And so? Seeing that she hadn't provoked me, she pulled hard, snapping the prayer beads, and screamed loudly. Alara, I know I shouldn't have taken something you gave Julian. Please don't do this. Julian, who was nearby, saw Chloe being bullied. He immediately pushed me violently to the ground. My temple hit the corner of the wall, and warm blood trickled down my cheek. My face was contorted in pain, and my consciousness began to blur. Alara, if you have a problem, take it out on me. This isn't Chloe's fault, I'm the one who gave it to her. Seeing my blood, Julian looked utterly disgusted. Stop faking it, Alara. That feigned death act doesn't work on me. He was about to say something more, but my head fell back heavily. As my consciousness faded, the last thing I heard was Julian's panicked calls for me, and the doctor's complaining words. I told you, a blood transfusion like this would put Ms. Alara's life at risk. Just when I thought I could finally return to my original world, I opened my eyes, and the person before me was still Julian. Seeing me awake, his previously tense expression slowly relaxed. He hugged me excitedly. You scared me to death, Chloe. The next second, he ordered someone to bring in a cake. I paused for 2 seconds, then remembered that today was our 3rd wedding anniversary. He had once said that he would spend every anniversary with me after we got married. Just as he picked up the lighter to light the candles, motioning for me to make a wish, from next door, Chloe's voice, tinged with surprise, drifted over. Julian, I'm pregnant. The cake, left behind by Julian who rushed out in a hurry, was carelessly knocked to the floor. I carefully picked it up, but I couldn't get it back to how it was just moments before. Closing my eyes, the memory of my first wedding anniversary with Julian flashed in my mind. I had tentatively asked him then, what if he didn't keep his promise to spend anniversaries with me in the future? He had blurted out almost instantly, then you can punish me by never seeing me again for the rest of my life. That would make me suffer forever. The candles were extinguished by me alone. Julian, this time I truly will punish you by never seeing you again for the rest of your life. I scooped up the cake from the floor with my hand. Before, Julian and I didn't have money to buy cake, but now that we do, it tastes bitter and utterly unsweet. For several days in a row, I didn't see Julian. He ordered bodyguards to watch me 24/7, fearing I might do something again. On my phone, trending topics about him and Chloe were pushed to me almost daily, and the comments were filled with even more vicious cyberbullying/online harassment directed at me. Late at night, in a daze, I felt something moving beside me. Propping up my muddled head, I realized my feet were bound, and I was sitting in Julian's car. Julian, in the driver's seat, was speeding. Glancing and seeing me awake, he spoke. "Those elderly villagers who almost assaulted you that day have been released. They said they'd only let Chloe go if I handed you over. So you're going to use me to trade for Chloe?" My voice was choked with tears. The memory of that day, flashing in my mind, made my entire body tremble uncontrollably. "Yes. Just hold on a little longer. Once I save Chloe, I'll immediately come for you. Chloe is pregnant, and I can't let her suffer any harm." His voice was cold, and his foot continued to press hard on the accelerator. Although the system said that dying in this world would allow me to return to my original one, enduring such humiliation again would surely drive me insane, even if I returned to my original world. I struggled desperately, but the ropes were tied securely. "Julian, please, let me go. If you send me back, I'll die." "What's all this talk about dying, Alara? I told you not to threaten me with death." His expression was disgusted, and after that, he ignored my repeated pleas. My heart felt like ashes, and I desperately tried to calm myself. Soon, Julian brought me to a rooftop. As soon as I saw those three disgusting men, their faces contorted in lecherous smiles, I couldn't stop retching, and cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Julian, fearing I might escape, dragged me forcefully forward. After throwing me aside, he rushed to check on Chloe. Seeing that Chloe hadn't suffered any harm, Julian breathed a sigh of relief, then picked her up and prepared to leave. As he reached the stairs, he turned and, in a casual tone, told me to hold on. The three village men eagerly surrounded me, frantically untying the ropes binding me. Greasy hands continually groped my body. I fought desperately to evade them, only to be met with countless slaps. My face was swollen from the blows, and my mouth filled with blood. I used all my strength to inch backward, and just as the villagers untied the ropes, I lunged forward and jumped. As my body plummeted, I just happened to see Julian, who felt a pang of sympathy, holding Chloe in his arms. And he met my gaze. His face turned ashen, and he roared in disbelief. As my consciousness faded, I saw Julian's frantic figure running towards me. And the familiar system prompt, "Congratulations, host. You have successfully returned to your original world." Julian ran forward almost like a madman. His voice was mournful, and it felt as if all the blood in his body was rushing backward. Looking at Alara, covered in wounds and blood-stained clothes, cradled in his arms, his body trembled uncontrollably. "No, Alara, wake up. I told you I'd come for you soon. Please, just hold on a little longer." Julian, usually so cold and composed, was now sobbing uncontrollably. He frantically pulled out his phone from his pocket and dialed 911. Chloe, who had been rescued nearby, tried to approach and comfort him. But Julian wasn't as gentle with her as before, he even pushed her away accidentally. Chloe stumbled and fell, then struggled to her feet, watching Julian, who had once only cared for her, now focusing solely on Alara. She complained jealously, "Who knows if she just jumped on purpose, like before, to get your attention?" The next second, a resounding slap landed on Chloe's face. Chloe's eyes widened in disbelief, and she clutched her swollen cheek as she looked at Julian. The temperature around Julian seemed to drop to 0 degrees. Before, he could indulge Chloe because he also thought Alara was trying to threaten him with death. But now, feeling Alara's body temperature growing colder in his arms, he finally had a revelation, realizing he had truly lost her. He sobbed uncontrollably, and seeing that the ambulance hadn't arrived, he drove thousands of miles himself, speeding Alara to the hospital. He paced restlessly in the hospital corridor, the panicked feeling leaving him utterly helpless. He chain-smoked, but it was no use. After a long afternoon of anxious waiting, he desperately walked to the open emergency room door. Contrary to his expectations, what was wheeled out of the emergency room was Alara's body, covered by a white sheet. And the doctor's helpless words of comfort. "I'm sorry, Mr. Julian. Your wife's injuries were too severe, we did everything we could." His legs instantly gave out, and he collapsed to the floor. He clutched desperately at the edge of Alara's body, as if that could bring her back. He roared and screamed loudly, "No way! You incompetent doctors! Alara can't be dead. She said she'd never leave me." Julian sobbed breathlessly, losing all his usual arrogant composure. Curious passers-by snapped photos, and a buzz of chatter filled the air. He, who always cared about his image, paid no mind. Finally, his assistant, who had seen the circulating videos and rushed over, painstakingly pulled him away. Julian didn't know how he managed to arrange Alara's funeral. When he returned home, holding the ashes/urn in his arms, a dull ache in his chest lingered. He felt as if he had lost something incredibly vital, utterly desolate and despairing. He walked into the bedroom Alara used to occupy, only to find that all of Alara's and his former wedding photos had been thrown away. He furiously questioned the housekeeper, only to hear the housekeeper say that Chloe had instructed her to throw away all of Madame's belongings, to prevent Mr. Julian from grieving over her belongings even more. Julian was furious. He had said he would let Chloe stay until she gave birth, but he had never allowed Chloe to interfere with the affairs of his home. The next second, the phone rang. It was the police. They said they had found out who ordered the elderly villagers to abduct her. After returning to my real life, I finally recovered from the extreme fear. The slowly fading pain in my body seemed to still remind me of the horrific events I had just experienced. Fortunately, after several days of patient psychological therapy, my mood gradually improved, and the fear slowly vanished without a trace. Upon receiving the $5 million transferred by the system, I was overjoyed. Back in my original world, I learned that after my parents passed away, relatives had simply found a cemetery to bury them. I asked many people before finally finding their cemetery on a desolate patch of land, marked by 2 hastily piled mounds of earth. With that $5 million, I purchased a luxurious cemetery for my parents. In life, they were plagued by illness. In death, I wished for them to rest more comfortably. At their graveside, I cried as I spoke of my filial impiety. I hadn't been able to care for them when they were critically ill. After crying to the end, I took a deep breath. After saying my final goodbyes, leaving behind their favorite foods, I sadly departed. With this $5 million, I finally no longer had to repeat my exhausting previous work. I slept until I woke naturally every day, and when I had nothing to do, I'd drink with my girlfriends and get drunk, completely forgetting the pain from that other world. No longer having to apologize to Chloe, no longer being abandoned in the snow, no longer suffering malicious cyberbullying/online harassment. The happiness of the real world made me forget all the previous suffering. A year later, as I was sleeping at home, the system, which I hadn't heard from in a long time, appeared in my ear once again. Host, Julian's suicide index is steadily rising. If he cannot return to normal, the system world will soon be destroyed by him. His only wish now is to see you one last time. The time limit is 5 days. If the system world is destroyed, I will also disappear. Please, host, will you help me one more time? Hearing Julian's name again after several years, I felt a momentary daze. But hearing the system's request, which had helped me get $5 million despite my uncompleted mission, I hesitated. After a few seconds, I nodded in agreement. Although I was very reluctant to see Julian, I was willing to endure for 5 days for the sake of the system. Pushing open the door, a sudden white light appeared before me. Julian, looking much thinner, appeared before me as well. The moment he saw me, his eyes lit up intensely. He ran to me at top speed. He forcefully pulled me into his arms, using all his strength to hold me tightly, preventing me from resisting. His breath hitched against my neck, and tears streamed down his face onto my skin. Julian's voice was choked with sobs and unprecedented weeping. "I thought you were dead, Alara. I am so sorry. It's all my fault for blindly trusting Chloe and harming you. Chloe is a college student. I thought she was innocent, but I never imagined she could be so malicious, even conspiring with 3 old men to put on a show. He tearfully poured out his heart to me, lamenting the injustices he had caused, with large tears streaming down his face. Yet I was utterly disgusted and impatiently used all my strength to push him away. Chloe was wrong, but he was the one who had constantly indulged her. Pushed away, Julian's eyes were bloodshot, as if he couldn't accept me treating him this way. The next second, he dropped to his knees, his eyes pleading like a pitiful puppy. I know I was wrong, Alara, but I truly can't live without you. I've tried to kill myself countless times, only hoping to see you again, until I discovered the system's existence. This is a chance from heaven. Please, give me time to make it up to you, okay? Tears streamed down his face, and his eyes were brimming with guilt. But my heart remained completely unmoved. It was like watching an irrelevant person go mad. I had agreed to meet him for 5 days for the system's sake, but I had never agreed to forgive him. Raising my head, I looked down at him, kneeling on the ground. Just as he had repeatedly looked down on me to punish me for Chloe's sake. There's no future for us, Julian. We should have broken up the moment you first cheated with Chloe. My agreement to meet you this time is only for the system's sake, otherwise, I'd rather never see you again for the rest of my life. As I spoke, painful memories resurfaced in my mind. He made me endure cyberbullying/online harassment for Chloe's sake. It caused people to roll their eyes at me and hurl insults when I went out, and my direct messages/DMs were full of comments telling me to die. He put me in a burlap sack and threw me into an isolated mountain community for Chloe's sake, making me endure the groping and molestation of foul-smelling old men. The more I thought, the more my emotions spiraled. Now, he sheds a few tears and says he regrets what he did, expecting me to forgive him. That's absolutely impossible. I stood up, leaving him kneeling on the ground. Compared to the harm he inflicted on me, how could this minor punishment of his ever be enough? For 3 consecutive days, he remained kneeling in front of my door until he fainted from heatstroke. Reluctantly, I had no choice but to carry him inside. He slept for a day and then woke up. Opening his eyes and finding himself in my home, he was overjoyed, thinking I had finally forgiven him. But as he got up, my cold voice sounded from behind him, "Drink this nourishing soup/broth. Tomorrow, you should go back." He drank the nourishing soup/broth, mixing it with his tears, his eyes filled with reluctance to leave me. But I only felt disgusted. He wandered around my house and, upon seeing my family photo on the wall, he asked curiously, "Where are your parents? Don't they live with you?" "They passed away. They died while you were with Chloe." The next second, he said nothing more. Guilt was clearly visible on his face. So, he could feel guilt after all. Yet, when he troubled me to protect Chloe, such guilt lasted only for a few seconds. Now, it was so obvious. But it was useless. His guilt seemed utterly pointless at that moment. It seemed he finally realized the extent of the harm he had caused me, as he stopped bothering me from that afternoon onwards. The last dinner was prepared by Julian himself. The table was laden with all my favorite dishes. He was afraid I'd have trouble eating the shrimp, so he specially peeled each one and placed it in my bowl. I vaguely recalled that when I first arrived in that world, he had also cared for me with such meticulous attention. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but his voice was choked with sobs, unable to utter a complete sentence. In the final few minutes, he tearfully pulled out a piece of paper. It clearly listed my preferences and dislikes. He struggled to control his emotions, his voice trembling as he spoke. "I'm sorry, Alara. I love you. I thought I would never cheat, but then Chloe appeared. The youthful energy she possessed captivated me. I took advantage of the fact that you wouldn't leave me, and I wantonly troubled you for her sake. It wasn't until you left that the bone-deep pain made me realize my feelings for Chloe were just a fleeting novelty. But it was too late. Your heart is beyond salvaging." Under a dazzling light, Julian's last words to me were, "I'm sorry. It's okay, but I will never forgive you." Listening to my words, he shed tears again. Life seemed to have truly returned to peace. No one bothered me anymore. I opened an art training institution, spending my days doing what I loved. The system fully detached from me 3 years later. It also showed me scenes from the other world. Chloe was imprisoned, and Julian had people torment her constantly. As for Julian, he spent every day grieving over her belongings, facing my portrait. He had become somewhat normal, but a faint sadness always lingered within him. He published our marriage certificate, clarifying everything for me. The comment section also turned into a torrent of insults directed at him and Chloe, and many netizens began to mourn me. I had completely become Julian's unattainable ideal. But what did it matter? Being loved by such a repulsive person felt more like a disgrace. My girlfriends around me began arranging suitable matches for me. They said a girl like me, fair-skinned, beautiful, wealthy, and with a career, could pick anyone she wanted. And I did choose a good one, my childhood sweetheart. I heard from relatives that Ryan had helped take care of my parents quite a bit during the time I was gone. We married quickly, and the shadow Julian had cast upon me slowly faded under his nurturing care, until I completely forgot him, and my life was moving towards a better direction. My art institution was reviewed by influencers, and business became exceptionally popular. Students enrolling lined up down the street. My artworks quickly won awards, even a prestigious national award, and were displayed in our city museum. I quickly gained fame, becoming a popular online author, and opened my own art exhibition. This had been my dream since childhood, and on the opening day of the exhibition, I sobbed uncontrollably. It was all worth it, and my future would be even brighter.